Hello and welcome back to the studio. Today's painting is the Bob Ross classic Forest Edge, with a couple of little additions from me of course to make it uniquely mine. All the paints and products I'm using are listed down below, so if you make a purchase I get a tiny little commission, but the price is the same to you. Those little commissions add up and they help to support the channel. So without further ado, let's get on with our painting. And the title? How to paint puddles in oils. That's how to paint watery puddles in oils rather than puddles of oils. I hope that's clear. Anyway, sit back and relax. Happy painting, people. So here's my canvas, 16 inches by 20, and it's got a coating of grey gesso on it. But I want to use some black gesso to create a backdrop, an underpainting. I'll be using a small round bristle brush, a detail brush, and a piece of this, a cast sponge I can use to stipple on some paint and create some textures. I start out with just a small amount of black gesso, work it through the sponge, and we want to do a little bit of planning. We don't want to just be putting this everywhere. So I think about thirds, about a third way across and maybe a third up from the base. So about here for my light spot, and I'll just dab on a few little bits of black gesso around that area. That reminds me not to fill that up with black gesso. Let's think about where we might have some trees. Again, I'll just put these in lightly and maybe a big tree to the side here. So it's all about layouts. Now, remember, we want to keep that open. I want to bring in a big tree trunk just here. So I'll just put a little bit of black gesso there to remind me, again, where things are going to live in my painting. Now I've got that sorted out, I can come back and fill this area in completely. But I do want a little bit of texture for the background, so I lightly stipple on some of the black gesso. I want to add a tree trunk here, and I'm going to use my round brush. Now, size and position, quite important. I don't want to be too to the right, and I don't want to be too straight and upright and too close to the left. So load my round brush well, and think about doing something maybe a little to the right of my original mark. Maybe with a slight lean to it, but not too steep. And just block in the shape of the tree trunk. I start a little narrower than I think I might need it, because I can always grow it a little bigger. Let's wiggle on a few branches, and again, just lightly sketch these to start with. Now, my number one top tip, don't paint a tree that looks like your hand with 5 branches sticking out the top. It works quite well for palm trees, of course, but not for one of these woodland trees. Sorry about that joke. It's my only art joke. Well, I do have a couple more, but I'll save those for another painting. So here's my finished tree, but it has a problem. The top is too wide for the base. This is such a common thing I see on a painting, and I think I need to just grow this out to be a bit more in proportion. I know trees have branches that overlap at the top so they can appear to be top heavy, but in my world I want my tree to be in proportion. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush and a couple of drops of water just to add some smaller branches and some detail in the undergrowth. It helps to add as many layers as possible at this stage, because those details will show up in the finished painting. Now time to let things dry. I'll turn on my special art watch, make a cup of tea. So here's the dried painting. Make sure your painting is completely dry before you put any oil paints on top. And this is what I'm going to start with, Bob Ross Liquid Clear Oil Paint. I want to put a thin, even coat all over the canvas. I keep it in a little pot for ease of application. My brushes, I've got 2 1-inch brushes by Bob Ross. This nice new one and this hard, old, worn-out one for scrubbing on liquid clear. A filbert brush, a liner brush, and of course a Bob Ross palette knife. Using that old brush to like a small amount of liquid clear, and I like to do my painting in sections, corner by corner, and really scrub it into the canvas. You don't want too much of this on because your painting will become very, very slippery and hard to paint on. I made a video all about this, and here's a link to it in the corner. I like to run my finger over the canvas and check that it's not too oily. And I want to use this 1-inch brush again. So I squeeze and pinch and dry as much of the liquid clear out as possible. That black is from black gesso. It's just some of the dust. My first colour will be sap green. I'll list all the colours in the description down below. And I want to apply this everywhere. It sounds a little bit strange, but I actually want to cover the black up as well. And you can see that it is a semi-opaque colour. It just shows against the black. Make sure you apply a good strong coat, otherwise your painting will look a little bit insipid. Now let's apply a nice bright spot of light just here. On my palette I've got some titanium white, and I'm going to add just a touch of Indian yellow to that. I want to just warm up this colour. I don't really want a pale white light. I want a little slightly golden colour to it. So just a hint is all you need, and you see I'm loading it onto the corner of my 1-inch brush. Use the corner of your brush and go right into the centre of this area, and as you see I'm going to let my brush just swirl. It'll pick up green as it goes, and we'll get this brilliant lime green colour. It may not be bright enough the first time, so don't forget, go back, reload your brush, but always start back in that very central area first. That way you're increasing the intensity of light in the centre. As you can see, my brush got a little hint of green on it, but it won't affect the colour too much. Right back in the centre again. As we do this, you can almost make out some distant trees in the background. This is a lovely effect. It's more about smoke and mirrors, what you almost can't see, but what you can almost see, that makes my painting appear more like you're deep in a woodland. If you enjoy my tutorials, don't forget to like, subscribe and share it through social media with your friends and family. I'm sure they'll enjoy watching me too. Time for some detail. I've got my liner brush with a couple of drops of thinners, and I'm going to go into sap green and some black. I want a really dark green colour for this, and I'm going to use just the very, very point of my liner brush just to put on some little sticks and twigs in the background of my painting. I'll add some stronger ones to the trees and the bushes on the right and left. Let's add some highlights to these little trees and bushes in the centre here. I've got my nice 1-inch brush, and again I want to load it with a bright limey green colour that's going to stand out. I've got sap green, cadmium yellow and a little touch of white, but pay careful attention to the way I load my brush. I give it a little push and I favour one corner. Press and swing that brush in so you really load paint on one corner of the brush. I want to make sure that when I tap with it, I have paint just sitting there on the tips of the bristles. So watch carefully. Let's do the trees over here on the right first. Off your brush to the canvas and just tip it so that the corner is doing all the work. I just want to add the merest sparkle of light to some of these little trees and bushes. Leave some of the dark showing through. It's the dark colour that gives your trees and bushes their shape and form, so try not to overdo it. Don't worry about putting some of the highlights across the tree trunk. We'll sort that out in a minute. Notice how I swing the handle of my brush left and right. It stops me painting my trees and bushes too stripy? Think about painting each section of a tree or bush one limb at a time. Don't forget to vary your colours, this time a little bit more Indian yellow just for the edge of this tree that's facing the light, and again I'm using just the corner and painting one section of my tree at a time. And my second top tip is stand back often. This isn't the first time I've told you this little piece of information, but somehow when we get started with our painting, we get excited and we can't stand up. We're almost obsessed with adding paint. How do I know this? Well, I've done it quite a few times myself, but with some training, I remember to stand up and walk away from my painting, if only just make a cup of tea, of course. This is the part of my painting I enjoy doing most of all. Saving those lovely darks, creating those lovely shadowy areas. All those little critters will be asleep, but you can create so much depth and atmosphere in a painting. And then at the very end of the painting, I might just come back in places like here and just add a few sparklers or top up the shadows a little. Let's fix this tree. I've got my filbert brush and some black and some Van Dyke brown. I just want a really deep dark colour, not just straight black. And I load my brush very well. And I'm going to just block in the areas where I've overpainted with some highlight. The highlight colours are quite thin and oily, so I can block them in very easily. And as you can see, I like to put a few nice little lumps and bumps on the side of my tree trunks. Give them a little character. The other reason why I'm using a filbert brush to do this is because I want to create some texture. I could have used a knife to do this, but I think a filbert brush today is my choice. Now let's add a few more little limbs, sticks and twigs and extend that one out a little bit more. Now time for some highlights on that trunk. Filbert brush or a palette knife? Which one shall I use? Filbert brush. And this is the inspiration for this tree. A wonderful old tree I filmed a few weeks ago in a park. Look at that trunk. I bet that tree could tell some stories. Anyway, back to my painting. My highlights are a mixture of titanium white, a little dark sienna and a little Van Dyke brown, but notice how I lay them out on my palette. I separate the two darks with a streak of dirty white paint. I don't want my two brown colours running into each other, and I load my brush very well. And I'm holding it as though it were a stick. In other words, I don't hold it like a pen. I want to use the side of the brush just to drag and let it bump and curve around the trunk, just like the tree in that little video I showed you. Let the brush do the work. Let the paint flow. The less control you have, somehow the nicer the effect. As I work around my tree, I let the colour run out and let some of that dark chocolatey brown colour that we underpainted the tree come to the fore. This creates an automatic sort of shadow side to my tree. Don't be afraid to experiment with your colours. I'm using sienna, ochre, little Indian yellow, and if all else fails, you can always scrape it off. It's your chance to have some fun, to play. Let's make the right side of my tree really pop. I've got some white and a tiny bit more of that Indian yellow colour. I just want to create a little bit of a zinger, something to really take your eye. This can be sort of almost overly bright, but it looks so great on a painting. Once again, just experiment. Now for a new colour. A little bit of this grubby white colour on a dry cleaned filbert brush with a little touch of Prussian blue, and I want it quite dark. If it's too bright, I can always add a little bit of black to it, but I'm going to go with this very deep navy blue colour. And this is for the left side of my tree trunk. It's something called referred light, and it is light that bounces back from something to the left of the tree. So maybe the bushes are casting a little colour on the tree trunk. This really helps the tree stand out. I'm going to carry on using some of my marble mix colour for the tree trunk to work on the path. So I take a little bit of that colour. It's sort of become a bit more sort of caramel because it's been mixed by the brush, and I want to lighten it slightly. Way back here in the distance, my pathway starts out very small, maybe only an inch wide. By the time I finish this path, it will stretch the entire width of my canvas. Again, a top tip here, get your path in perspective. If it's only an inch wide at the back and 2 inches wide in the front of your painting, it looks like it's too narrow. You need to grow paths much wider than you expect. Under the bushes on the right, I just add a little bit more of that Van Dyke brown colour to create a little bit more of a shadow. Just like the tree, it's all about experimenting and playing with colour. I've added a little bit of sienna into my path now just to brighten it up slightly, but I want something else. There's something here. Yes, I'm going to put a puddle or two on my path, and I've got some of that bright lime green colour for the background. Press and pull down, press and pull down. I want to just leave a little bit of a shadowy green on the right, and then gently brush across to create a watery effect. I'll come back in with my palette knife, and with a little bit of Van Dyke brown, I want to lay in the edge of the puddle. This just needs to be a little bit dark at the back to give the impression that the puddle is sitting down in the ground. I can then come back with more of my brown tones and finish the path. Now just a small repair at the base of my tree. A little bit more of that bright highlight, really make it stand out. And that points towards the puddles. So my eye is being led towards a feature. Now let's just add a few extra highlights to the edge of my path. This again is a small touch, but it really helps to bring the path and the background foliage all together. Try and soften these edges in your own paintings. Over on this left hand corner, I want to bring in a few small weeds, maybe a few little bits of moss, and even a little bit of a grassy bank. Just tapping with the 1-inch brush and various mixtures of cadmium yellow, yellow ochre and Indian yellow. Work in layers and don't kill off all that lovely dark again. You want lots of lovely texture. Just a few grasses, sticks and twigs to complete my painting. And of course, don't forget a signature. If you've enjoyed watching my tutorial, don't move. There's a ton of new videos coming out all the time. But in the meantime, watch some of these. They're wonderful and they'll really help you get started with your Bob Ross paintings. Happy painting, people.